What started as a routine late-night interview turned into television chaos when Tom Hardy unleashed his fury on Jimmy Kimmel during last night's show, creating one of the most explosive confrontations in talk show history. The atmosphere in the Jimmy Kimmel live studio felt electric as Tom Hardy walked onto the stage, his trademark intensity barely contained beneath his casual demeanor. The audience erupted in cheers for the beloved actor, fresh off his latest blockbuster success. Kimmel, grinning with his usual smugness, gestured for Hardy to take his seat on the iconic couch. "Tom Hardy, everybody," Kimmel announced, clapping, his hands together. "Thanks for being here, man. I know you're not usually one for the talk show circuit." Hardy settled into his chair, offering a polite nod to the audience before turning his attention to the host. "Yeah, well, figured it was about time," he replied, his voice carrying that distinctive gravel that had made him a household name. The interview began innocuously enough, with Kimmel asking about Hardy's latest film projects and his preparation methods. Hardy answered with his characteristic thoughtfulness, discussing the physical and mental demands of his roles. The audience hung on every word, clearly captivated by the actor's authentic presence. But as the conversation progressed, Kimmel's questions began to take a more personal turn. He started probing into Hardy's past struggles with addiction, a topic the actor had been open about in previous interviews, but clearly preferred to discuss on his own terms. "So, Tom, you've been very brave about talking about your past issues with substance abuse," Kimmel said, his tone taking on a more serious note. "How do you think that experience has shaped the darker characters you play?" Hardy's jaw tightened slightly, but he maintained his composure. "I think any life experience informs your work as an actor. The important thing is moving forward and focusing on the positive aspects of recovery." Kimmel wasn't satisfied with the diplomatic response. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a more intimate tone. "But come on, Tom. You were pretty wild back in the day, right? I mean, there are some crazy stories out there." The shift in Hardy's demeanor was subtle, but unmistakable. His shoulders tensed, and his eyes narrowed slightly as he studied Kimmel's face. "I think we've covered that ground sufficiently," he said, his voice maintaining its calm but carrying a warning edge. But Kimmel, perhaps sensing he was onto something that would generate buzz, pressed on. "I heard you once got so wasted that you woke up in a stranger's garden wearing nothing but a tutu. Is that true?" The audience laughed nervously, sensing the growing tension between host and guest. Hardy sat back in his chair, his expression darkening. "Where did you hear that?" he asked, his voice now completely devoid of warmth. "Oh, the internet," Kimmel replied with a dismissive wave. "It's all out there. I just thought it would be funny to get your take on it." Hardy's hands gripped the arms of his chair. "Funny for who, exactly?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Kimmel, seemingly oblivious to the brewing storm, chuckled and looked to the audience for support. "Come on, Tom. We're all friends here. These stories are part of what makes you interesting." "Interesting?" Hardy's voice rose slightly and the audience fell silent. "You think my struggles with addiction are interesting entertainment for your viewers?" Kimmel's smile faltered for the first time. "I didn't mean it like that, Tom. I just thought—" "You thought what?" Hardy interrupted, leaning forward in his chair. "That you could use my lowest moments as punchlines for your monologue tomorrow night?" The studio had gone completely quiet, except for the hum of cameras. Even the band members looked uncomfortable, sensing that something was about to explode. Kimmel tried to backtrack, his voice taking on a placating tone. "Look, I'm sorry if I overstepped. I was just trying to have a fun conversation." "Fun?" Hardy's voice was deadly quiet now. "There's nothing fun about watching someone you claim to respect squirm while you dig into their personal trauma for laughs." The host's face flushed red as he realized the interview was spiraling completely out of control. "Tom, I think you're overreacting here. This is how talk shows work. We joke around. We have fun with each other's stories." Hardy stood up abruptly, his imposing frame casting a shadow over Kimmel's desk. "No, Jimmy. This is how your show works. You invite people here under the pretense of promoting their work. Then you ambush them with personal questions designed to humiliate them for your audience's amusement." The cameras continued rolling as the confrontation reached a boiling point, capturing every word of what was about to become the most talked-about moment in late-night television history. Kimmel, clearly rattled by Hardy's towering presence, tried to regain control of the situation. "Tom, please sit down. Let's just take a breath here and—" "Don't tell me what to do," Hardy cut him off, his voice cutting through the studio like a blade. "You've spent the last 10 minutes trying to turn my recovery into your comedy material, and now you want me to calm down." The audience sat frozen, witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't the scripted banter they were used to seeing on late-night television. This was raw, unfiltered confrontation happening in real time. Kimmel's producers in the control room were frantically gesturing, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the drama play out. The ratings potential was enormous, but so was the risk of complete disaster. "Look, I apologize if I crossed a line," Kimmel said, his voice shaking slightly. "But you knew coming on a talk show meant discussing your life. That's what we do here." Hardy's laugh was bitter and harsh. "What you do here is exploit people's vulnerabilities for cheap laughs. You hide behind this facade of being the friendly neighborhood host while you stick the knife in when your guests are most vulnerable. That's not fair, Tom. I've had thousands of guests, and none of them have reacted like this. Because most of them are too polite or too scared to call you out on your predatory behavior," Hardy shot back. "They smile and nod while you humiliate them because they need the publicity more than they need their dignity." The band leader shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. The audience members were taking out their phones, recording what they sensed was television history in the making. Kimmel's face grew redder as his composure completely crumbled. "Predatory? Are you serious right now? I'm trying to have a conversation with you, and you're acting like I'm some kind of monster." "You are a monster," Hardy replied without hesitation. "You're a monster who preys on people's pain and packages it as entertainment. You've built your entire career on making people uncomfortable and then acting surprised when they finally fight back." The studio erupted in shocked murmurs. No guest had ever spoken to Kimmel this way on his own show. The host looked around, desperately seeking support from his audience, but found only stunned faces staring back at him. "This is insane," Kimmel stammered. "You're completely overreacting to a few harmless questions. This is what actors do. They promote their movies and talk about their lives." "Harmless?" Hardy's voice rose to a roar that echoed through the studio. "You think dredging up someone's darkest moments and mocking them for laughs is harmless? You think there's no harm in turning someone's journey through addiction into your punchline?" Kimmel stood up behind his desk, trying to match Hardy's energy but falling short. "I never mocked you. I asked legitimate questions that any journalist would ask." "Journalist?" Hardy scoffed. "You're not a journalist, Jimmy. You're a carnival barker in an expensive suit. You don't ask questions to inform or enlighten. You ask them to get reactions that will go viral on social media." The confrontation had reached a fever pitch, with both men standing and facing off across the desk. The studio lights seemed brighter somehow, casting harsh shadows that made the scene even more dramatic. "You know what your problem is, Tom?" Kimmel's voice cracked with emotion. "You can't handle the fact that people know you're not perfect. You've built this tough guy image, and you can't stand it when someone reminds the world that you're human." Hardy's eyes blazed with fury. "My problem? My problem is sitting across from a man who thinks other people's pain is his playground. You don't get to decide what parts of my life are fair game for your entertainment." The tension in the room was suffocating. Crew members stood frozen at their positions, unsure whether to intervene or let the confrontation continue. This was far beyond anything they'd ever witnessed on the show. "I think we should end this interview," Kimmel said, his voice barely audible. "Now you want to end it?" Hardy's laugh was cold and menacing. "After you've gotten your viral moment? After you've squeezed every drop of drama out of my discomfort?" Kimmel's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of his desk. "Tom, please, let's just—" "No," Hardy interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the silent studio. "You wanted entertainment, Jimmy. You wanted a show. Well, here's your show." The actor turned to face the audience, his commanding presence filling the entire space. "Ladies and gentlemen, you're witnessing something rare tonight. You're seeing what happens when someone finally refuses to play along with this man's cruel games." The audience sat in stunned silence, phones still recording, capturing every word of Hardy's impromptu speech. "For years, Jimmy Kimmel has made his living by humiliating his guests," Hardy continued, his voice gaining strength. "He invites celebrities onto his stage, pretends to be their friend, and then systematically tears them down for your amusement. Tonight, that ends." Kimmel's face had gone pale. "Tom, you're destroying your career right now. Do you understand that?" Hardy turned back to face the host, his smile cold and predatory. "My career? Jimmy, I think you should be more worried about your own career right now." The studio erupted in whispers as the gravity of the situation hit everyone present. This wasn't just a heated exchange. This was a complete dismantling of everything Kimmel represented. "You see, the difference between us," Hardy said, walking around the desk to stand directly in front of Kimmel, "is that I built my reputation on talent and hard work. You built yours on the misery of others." Kimmel backed away, bumping into his chair. "Security! Where is security?" "Security won't save you from the truth, Jimmy," Hardy replied calmly. "And the truth is that you're a parasite. You feed off other people's vulnerabilities because you have nothing of substance to offer on your own." The control room was in chaos, with producers screaming conflicting orders about whether to cut the feed or let it continue. The ratings were through the roof, but the damage to Kimmel's reputation was mounting by the second. "I've interviewed thousands of people," Kimmel stammered, his voice cracking. "I'm good at what I do." "What you do is pathetic," Hardy shot back. "You're not an interviewer. You're a vulture circling wounded prey. You wait for people to show vulnerability, and then you pounce." The audience began to murmur among themselves, some nodding in agreement with Hardy's words. The tide had clearly turned against the host in his own studio. Hardy stepped back, straightening his jacket with deliberate calm. "You know what, Jimmy? I actually feel sorry for you. You've spent so many years tearing other people down that you've forgotten how to build anything meaningful yourself." Kimmel's eyes filled with tears of rage and humiliation. "Get out! Get out of my studio!" "Your studio?" Hardy's eyebrows raised mockingly. "This isn't your studio, Jimmy. This is a television studio that you happen to work in. And after tonight, I wouldn't be surprised if that changes very quickly." The actor turned to leave, then paused and faced the audience one final time. "To everyone watching at home, remember this moment. Remember what happens when someone finally stands up to a bully. Remember that celebrities are human beings, not punching bags for late-night hosts to abuse for ratings." As Hardy walked toward the exit, Kimmel made one last desperate attempt to salvage his dignity. "You'll never work in this town again after this stunt." Hardy stopped and turned back, his smile now genuinely amused. "Jimmy, I don't need to work in this town. I'm Tom Hardy. I can work anywhere in the world. Can you say the same?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Kimmel stood alone behind his desk, his face flushed with embarrassment and fury, while Hardy strode confidently toward the exit. "This interview is over," Hardy announced to the cameras as he reached the edge of the stage. "And hopefully, so is Jimmy Kimmel's career as a talk show host." With that final devastating blow, Tom Hardy walked off the set, leaving behind a stunned audience, a humiliated host, and what would become the most viral moment in late-night television history. The cameras kept rolling as Kimmel stood frozen, behind his desk, his empire crumbling around him in real time. The silence in the studio was deafening, broken only by the sound of audience members gathering their belongings and filing out, many of them shaking their heads in disgust at what they had witnessed their beloved host become. Within hours, the confrontation would be trending worldwide, sparking conversations about respect, dignity, and the responsibility that comes with having a platform. Tom Hardy had done more than defend himself. He had exposed the ugly truth behind the glittering facade of late-night television.